She came into court wearing fake bruises and crocodile tears, clutching a tissue like it was a badge of honor. "He hit me," she whispered, just loud enough for the judge to hear. And just like that, I was no longer a father fighting for custody. I was a monster fighting to prove I didn't belong in a cage. The courtroom fell into a hush, a heavy silence that suffocated the truth, while her lawyer painted me as violent, unstable, and unfit to breathe the same air as my own children. I could see it on their face, every juror, every official watching me like I was one raised voice away from exploding. My hands trembled under the table, not from guilt, but from rage. Because I knew she was lying. I knew this entire circus was staged. But no one believed me. No one even gave me a chance to explain. She told the court I dragged her across the kitchen floor by her hair, that I slammed the door so hard it cracked the frame, that I screamed threats and cursed in front of our kids. And she showed them, the bruises yellowing splotches across her ribs, her arms, and one under her eye. A perfect show. But the part that tore me in half was the way my daughter looked at me from the gallery, uncertain, afraid, like she didn't know what to believe. Like she was wondering if the man who made her pancakes and tucked her in every night had been hiding a monster inside all along. And then when I thought I was finished, when even my own lawyer looked like she was struggling to breathe, I remembered the one thing that could prove everything: the security cameras. The ones I had installed months ago, after someone started keying my car and slashing my tires. I hadn't even thought about them until that moment. But they were there, watching, recording. Silent witnesses that didn't lie, didn't cry, didn't take sides. I told my lawyer. She motioned for a recess. We pulled the footage that same day. It showed her arriving at my house alone, uninjured. It showed her pacing the kitchen, practicing in the reflection of the microwave door. It showed her pouring red wine, then throwing the glass against the wall and smearing the liquid on her shirt. It showed her opening a compact mirror, dabbing her eye, and then curling into a ball just as the doorbell rang and the police arrived. The judge watched the footage twice. So did the jury. Her lawyer didn't say a word. And the courtroom, once filled with the sound of my character being shredded, was now silent for a very different reason. Now, let me tell you how it got this far. Because the truth didn't start in court. It started the day she realized she was losing control and decided she'd rather destroy me than let me walk away whole. It's strange how you never see the war coming, not when you're standing in what you think is love's last breath. My ex, Natalie, wasn't always like this. Or maybe she was, and I was too blind to see it. The early days of our relationship were a blur of passion and promises. She was magnetic, intelligent, fiery, unpredictable in a way that felt exciting when we were young and reckless. But after the kids came, her volatility turned from charming chaos into controlled detonations. Everything had to be her way. How the towels were folded, how the kids were dressed, how much time I could spend with my own parents. If I pushed back, even slightly, the storm would roll in. First came the cold silence, then the gaslighting, and finally, the emotional firebomb accusations, slammed doors, threats of taking the kids. Still, I stayed. For the children, I told myself. For stability. But the more I tried to keep the peace, the more she demanded obedience, not partnership. When I suggested couples therapy, she laughed. "You're the one with issues, not me." And just like that, the conversation ended. The cracks widened when I started reclaiming pieces of myself, hobbies, friendships, even gym time. I could see it in her eyes. Every hour I wasn't orbiting her felt like betrayal. The night everything shifted, I told her I wanted to separate. Not divorce, no, yet, but space. A trial run. Time to breathe. She stared at me for a long time, then calmly walked into our bedroom and locked the door. I slept on the couch. The next morning, she was all smiles. Made breakfast, packed the kids' lunches, even kissed me on the cheek. I thought stupidly that maybe she understood. That maybe, after all the tension, we'd reached some kind of grown-up agreement. 2 days later, I came home from work and found the locks changed. My clothes neatly folded were sitting in garbage bags on the front porch. There was a note. You wanted space. Now you have it. That night I slept in my car. The custody battle began almost immediately. At first, she demanded full custody, claiming I was emotionally unreliable. She accused me of neglect, of forgetting to pick up our son from soccer practice, which was her week, not mine. She said I yelled too much, that I didn't know how to handle sensitive children. She filed emergency orders to keep the kids away from me until further review. My lawyer advised me to stay calm. They usually go this route, she said. Just let the process play out. I nodded, but inside I was boiling. The kids cried every time they left my place. My daughter, Ellie, clung to my shirt like her life depended on it. My son, Mason, who was only 8, stopped talking in full sentences. He just nodded, shrugged, or said, "Fine," whenever I asked questions. I kept every text, every voicemail. I logged every interaction. I still believed facts would win. That evidence would triumph over emotion. But Natalie wasn't building a case based on facts. She was writing a story, and, in her version, I was the villain. The abusive husband, the neglectful father, the unstable man unraveling before their very eyes. And people bought it. She cried in court. Brought in family members to testify about my controlling tendencies. One even claimed I used to throw things during arguments. They didn't mention that I'd only thrown a pillow once after she hurled a mug at the wall. And then came the escalation. The real trap. One evening, she called and said she wanted to talk like adults for the kids' sake. She said we should try to meet halfway, maybe split holidays. Stop involving lawyers so much. I agreed, cautiously. We set a time for her to come by neutral ground during the day. I made sure the house was clean, calm, and quiet. When she showed up, she was dressed like she was going out for a funeral, oversized sunglasses, long sleeves, barely any makeup. Her voice was low, brittle. I thought she was upset. I offered her coffee. She declined. We spoke for 20 minutes. Nothing emotional, just logistics, school pickup, dentist appointments, future vacations. She nodded, took mental notes. Then she got up, said thank you, and left. 3 hours later, the police showed up at my door. They said they had a report of domestic assault filed just after she left my house. She claimed I'd pushed her into a wall, that I'd screamed in her face, that she feared for her life. My heart stopped. They asked me to come downtown for questioning. I complied. I had nothing to hide. But the entire time, a sick feeling grew in my stomach. I knew her, knew how far she could twist a moment. But this wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was sabotage. She was laying the groundwork to erase me completely, not just as a partner, but as a parent. The worst part? She had pictures, bruises, red marks, a scratch on her forearm. The officers didn't arrest me, but they filed a report. The next day, I was served with a restraining order and an emergency motion to strip me of all visitation. I couldn't see my kids, couldn't even call. I went from full weekends and weeknight dinners to nothing. But the cameras, God, the cameras. I had installed them months before, after someone vandalized my truck. I had forgotten about them in the chaos. They weren't flashy, just 2 little black domes tucked into corners of the living room and kitchen, and they caught everything, every second. And what they showed wasn't a violent encounter, it was a performance. Natalie had walked into my home completely uninjured. The footage showed her pacing, practicing her expressions in the oven's reflection. It showed her pouring red wine on her shirt, then smashing the glass. It showed her muttering to herself, touching up her eyes, pinching her own skin to create red marks. It showed her composing herself, then dialing the police. I handed that footage to my lawyer with shaking hands, and for the first time in weeks, I saw her eyes widen not with fear, but with fire. "This changes everything," she said. The footage didn't just contradict Natalie's accusations, it obliterated them. Frame by frame, minute by minute, her entire narrative unraveled with the quiet precision of truth. My lawyer, Amanda, reviewed every second like it was sacred scripture. She didn't speak for a long time, just scribbled notes, rewound certain sections, paused on specific frames. When she finally looked up, her voice was low and certain. "This isn't just exonerating, this is damning. For her." It was the first time I'd felt something close to hope in months. But hope in family court is dangerous. It can trick you into thinking justice is automatic. It isn't. You still have to fight like hell for it to matter. Amanda filed an emergency motion to enter the footage as new evidence. The court granted a hearing 2 days later. My hands shook the entire time we waited. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I had no idea how Natalie would react once the trap she'd set began to close on her instead. When we walked into the courtroom, she was already seated calm, composed, wearing a cream blouse and that same icy expression she wore during our last mediation. Her lawyer, Garrett, was smug as ever, fiddling with his cufflinks like the outcome was a foregone conclusion. But he hadn't seen the footage. Amanda stood and requested permission to introduce video evidence that directly contradicts the petitioner's sworn testimony. The judge raised an eyebrow. "You have video of the alleged incident?" Amanda nodded. "From inside the respondent's home. Time. Stamped. Continuous footage. No gaps." The courtroom tensed. Even Garrett's fingers froze mid-fidget. "Proceed," the judge said. Amanda cued the footage on the monitor. The lights dimmed slightly as the screen flickered to life. And there she was, Natalie, walking into my house. Perfectly healthy. No signs of distress. No marks. No bruises. We watched her walk calmly into the kitchen. Watched her stare at herself in the microwave's reflection. Watched her pour wine. Whisper something under her breath. Then smash the glass and smear the red liquid down her blouse. The gasps came slowly. Soft. Then louder. The courtroom murmured like a rising tide. My ex's lawyer leaned forward, face stiffening with each second. Natalie turned paler with every frame. Then the footage showed her pinching the skin on her arms, digging her fingernails into her forearm, pulling out a compact mirror and brushing beneath her eye with subtle flicks. She curled up on the floor as though she'd been struck, and then she picked up her phone. The 911 call began. Her voice trembled through the speakers. "Please help me. He hit me. I'm bleeding." But the room wasn't buying it anymore. When the footage ended, no one spoke. Even the judge just stared at the frozen final frame. Natalie curled up, not crying, just watching the door, waiting for the performance to be over. Amanda broke the silence. "Your Honor, this evidence directly disproves not only the claim of physical abuse, but the timeline, the injuries, and the intent. What's more, this shows deliberate staging of a crime. I request all current restrictions on Mr. Hargrove be lifted immediately, and that perjury charges be considered." Garrett stood. His voice was tight. "Your Honor, my client was under extreme emotional distress. This doesn't negate the totality of their volatile relationship." But the judge cut him off. "Counselor, you've just shown me a staged crime scene, a false report, and a sworn affidavit based on fiction. The only thing volatile here is your client's credibility." Natalie didn't speak. Her hands were clenched in her lap, fingers turning white. Her lawyer leaned over, whispered something into her ear, and she just nodded slowly, like she was watching a house burn down from the inside and realizing she was still trapped in it. The judge took a short recess to review the implications. When we reconvened, he didn't waste time. "All emergency orders against Mr. Hargrove are hereby dissolved," he declared. "Petitioner's credibility is in question. Pending further investigation, visitation rights with the children are suspended. A formal review of custodial fitness will be conducted." Natalie didn't flinch, but I saw it in her eye cracks forming. Not rage, not sadness. Something far more terrifying to a person like her. Exposure. Over the next few days, everything changed. The calls stopped. Her constant legal threats vanished. The storm of messages accusing me of abandonment, of being a coward, dried up like rain on sunburnt pavement. I picked up Mason and Ellie from school that Friday. With court permission, no handler, no supervisor, just me. Mason climbed into the car and burst into tears. "I thought I wasn't going to see you again," he said. Ellie clung to me and wouldn't let go for 10 minutes. I wanted to collapse, but I didn't. I had to be solid. For them. Because the war wasn't over, not yet. Natalie hadn't disappeared. She was regrouping. I knew that look, that silence. She wasn't defeated. She was recalculating. And people like her don't just walk away, they reload. But now, I had the footage, the truth, and 2 kids who were starting to believe in me again. The day after the footage shattered Natalie's story in court, I woke up to a dozen missed calls and a flurry of texts from numbers I didn't recognize. Some were apologies people who had taken her side, now unsure of where they stood. Others were vague, cowardly middle grounders offering lines like, "We never really believed her anyway," which felt more insulting than supportive. And then there were the ones from her bursts of rage, then silence, then sudden apologies, followed by more rage. Like a flickering fire alarm that refused to die, her messages kept coming. "You turned the kids against me. You think you've won? This isn't over. You're ruining everything." And maybe she was right. Everything she'd built was in ruins now. But I hadn't done it with lies. I'd done it with the truth she never expected me to find. My kids were the priority now. The court gave me temporary full custody, pending further investigation, and suddenly I was back in the rhythm I had missed more than I'd realized, packing school lunches, untangling Ellie's hair in the morning, teaching Mason how to tie his soccer cleats without making bunny ears. The first few days felt like walking across a frozen lake, beautiful, but you're waiting for the crack beneath your feet. The trauma of what Natalie had done hung in the air like smoke. Ellie had nightmares. Mason flinched when voices rose, even if we were just cheering during a movie. The damage wasn't physical, but it was real. Natalie's world crumbled in layers. First, her emergency petition for full custody was dismissed with prejudice. Then, her request for unsupervised visitation was denied outright. The judge ordered a psychological evaluation not just for me, but for her. That lit her fuse. She filed an appeal, alleging judicial bias. It was denied. Then she tried to claim I had edited the footage. Amanda calmly handed over the raw, time-stamped files and chain of custody documentation. Her accusations grew more erratic. She insisted the court had conspired against her, that I had bribed the judge, that I had coached the kids into fearing her. But Mason and Ellie weren't afraid because of me. They were afraid because they'd been used, weaponized. Natalie didn't just lie to the court, she lied to her own children. She told them I abandoned them, that I didn't care, that I'd left because I found someone better. Mason repeated some of those lies to me once, crying and apologizing as he did. "Mom said you didn't love us anymore," he whispered, like confessing a sin. I wrapped my arms around him so tightly he hiccuped. "That's never been true," I said. "Not for 1 second." The hardest part wasn't defending myself, it was untangling the mental knots she'd tied around our children's hearts. I started with simple routines. Breakfast together, walks after dinner, no phones during homework time. Every moment was a quiet declaration. This is real. This is safe. You're home now. We did therapy twice a week. At first, Mason would stare at the floor, arms crossed. Ellie sat with her stuffed bear and didn't speak. But over time, they thawed. Mason opened up about how scared he was when the police came. Ellie said she hated the wine stain on her mom's shirt because it looked like blood. That one broke me. Then came the moment I didn't expect when Natalie asked for a meeting. "Just to talk," she wrote. "No lawyers. For the kids." Amanda advised against it. So did the therapist. But I agreed. Part of me needed to see what she would say now, when the mask had been stripped away and her carefully crafted lies lay in ruins. We met in a neutral public place. She wore sunglasses, though it was overcast, and her hands fidgeted constantly. "I'm not a bad mother," she began, before I said a word. I lost control. You were always so calm, so righteous. It made me feel invisible." I stared at her. The words didn't even sting anymore. They felt rehearsed, another script. "You tried to destroy me," I said. "In court, with our kids, and you nearly succeeded." She blinked, as if surprised by the bluntness. "I didn't mean to," she began, but I cut her off. "You staged a crime scene, lied under oath, traumatized 2 children. Don't pretend it was a moment of weakness. She looked away, silent. Then she made her ask, "Supervised visitation. Just a few hours a week." "They're my children too," she said. I didn't respond. I let the court decide. And eventually, it did, permitting 2 supervised hours a week at a neutral facility. The kids didn't want to go at first, but I didn't push. I told them they could take their time, that they had a voice. And for once, they believed me. Meanwhile, Amanda filed a motion for Natalie to cover court costs, legal fees, and therapy bills. It passed. She owed us over 12-0. Her savings evaporated. Her reputation took a hit. People she manipulated, friends, family, even her own sister, started pulling away. The narrative was no longer hers to control. I was rebuilding from the rubble, but every brick laid came with the memory of how close I'd come to losing it all. And though Natalie's lies had been exposed, I knew she was still capable of damage, of sowing seeds that might bloom into weeds years later. So, I remained vigilant. I documented everything, kept every email, trusted but verified. The camera footage saved me, but it was the slow, patient work of earning my children's trust back that truly restored me. And every time Mason laughed without flinching, every time Ellie fell asleep without a nightmare, I felt like I'd gained a piece of myself again, not because I'd won, but because the truth had finally been allowed to speak. I used to think that once the truth came out, the system would work like it's supposed to, that justice would be swift and smooth, like a gavel strike echoing through marble halls. But I was wrong. Once the truth is out, the real mess begins. Because the family court system doesn't reward truth, it manages damage. After the footage exposed Natalie's lies, and the judge issued temporary full custody to me, I expected the courts to step in like a hammer, stripping her of her ability to manipulate further. Instead, I found myself trapped in a bureaucratic maze that seemed more concerned with optics than outcomes. The court had to proceed cautiously, the judge said, despite the footage. Due process? Protocols? They launched a parental fitness evaluation for both of us, as if what she did could somehow be weighed against my response to her lies. It was insulting. I didn't get angry. I got methodical. I complied with every order, showed up early for every appointment, took the kids to every therapy session, documented every meal, every bedtime routine, every missed call from her. I gave the system everything it demanded, and it still wasn't enough to guarantee peace. Natalie, meanwhile, played the long game. She shifted tactics. The sobbing victim routine no longer worked, so she leaned into the damaged but trying persona. She told evaluators she was suffering from situational anxiety caused by loss of maternal identity. She cried to therapists about being alienated from her children. Her new strategy was built around rehabilitation, not Hersman. She began subtly accusing me of being obsessively controlling, of creating an environment where the kids were afraid to express love for both parents. It was brilliant in a sick way. No more explosions, just slow drip poison. The evaluators didn't accuse me of anything, but they noted the high conflict nature of our dynamic. They suggested co-parenting counseling. I declined. Natalie immediately filed a claim that I was non-cooperative. I had to spend weeks proving that I wasn't required to attend because of the pending litigation. She began sending emails to the court-appointed parenting coordinator, claiming I withheld school updates and medical information. I'd already shared those exact updates, time-stamped and backed by screenshots. But every accusation cost me hours in paperwork. Every lie chipped away at my energy. The worst part? The system's obsession with neutrality. They treated us like two sides of the same broken coin. Both parents must learn to rebuild trust, the mediator said once, as if Natalie hadn't tried to frame me for assault in my own home. As if a false police report, fabricated injuries, and weaponized children could be brushed aside with a 6-week communication course. I sat in silence through that meeting, jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt for days. Mason and Ellie, meanwhile, were healing slowly, but steadily. Ellie began drawing again. Mason started helping me cook dinner. Their therapist noted clear improvements in behavior, sleep, and emotional stability. But whenever Natalie's name came up, they stiffened. Mason once asked if people go to jail for lying in court. I didn't have the heart to answer him with anything but sometimes, but not always. Natalie's supervised visits began just 2 hours a week at a family center filled with padded furniture and security cameras. The reports from the monitors were troubling. She cried often, tried to guilt them. Once told Ellie, "I hope you'll still remember me when you're older." Another time she asked Mason, "Do you think Daddy still loves me?" I filed the reports with the court. Amanda requested a hearing to revisit the terms of visitation. The judge agreed but warned us both. If this remains high conflict, the children will suffer most. I wanted to scream. High conflict? Natalie committed perjury, created a fake crime scene, and emotionally manipulated 2 children into fearing their father. That wasn't conflict, it was abuse. But the system doesn't use those words. It avoids them, because acknowledging abuse in family court means acting on it, and action is liability. During the next hearing, Amanda brought receipts, therapy reports, video footage from supervised visits, monitored emails. She read sections of the fabricated police report line by line, then showed its contradiction in the home footage. The judge listened, sighed, and said, "We have a difficult situation here." That was it. Not outrage, not condemnation, just difficulty. He reduced Natalie's visits to 1 hour a week, no physical contact unless initiated by the children. But even that was a compromise, not justice. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. Every time I stepped into court, I relived the worst betrayal of my life. Every time Natalie spoke, I flinched not because I feared her lies, but because I knew the system might still entertain them. Then, Natalie sent a handwritten letter to Mason through the visitation supervisor. The supervisor flagged it. In the letter, she told Mason that Daddy is trying to erase Mommy, and that some truths live in the heart, not on video. Mason gave it to his therapist without showing me. That was the moment I realized how strong he had become. He was 10 years old, and he was protecting himself better than the court had protected any of us. Amanda filed for a restraining order against unsupervised communication. It was granted. Natalie lost letter privileges. The judge ordered a new psychological evaluation with a focus on manipulative tendencies. The evaluation cited borderline narcissistic behavior patterns and emotional instability under pressure. It also stated that the petitioner may not currently possess the emotional maturity to safely co-parent. But still no termination of her rights, no criminal charges, just boundaries, just fences I had to guard every day. The truth had come out, but I learned the hard way. In family court, truth is only half the battle. The other half is endurance. And I had no choice but to outlast the storm that kept coming, one drop at a time. Truth had won in the courtroom, but outside those walls, the damage kept echoing in the lives of my children and mine. Natalie's lies may have been exposed, her tactics unraveled frame by frame, but some scars don't show up in custody reports or court transcripts. They sit in the quiet moments, in the flinches, in the shadows behind a child's eyes when someone raises their voice too quickly. They linger in the way Mason double-checks the locks before bed, or how Ellie clutches her stuffed bear when someone mentions her mother. The court gave me temporary full custody. The court said the danger had passed, but inside my home, I was still sweeping up the emotional glass her lies had shattered. The supervised visits continued under the court's revised orders, an hour a week, monitored, no physical touch unless the kids initiated it. And they never did. Ellie kept her arms crossed. Mason barely looked her in the eye. The reports noted emotional distress, avoidant behavior, lack of trust. Still, Natalie persisted. She cried. She begged. She told the supervisor, within earshot of the kids, that they'd see the truth one day. But they already had. The cameras caught her lies, but the kids' God, the kids lived them. One night, Mason asked me what gaslighting meant. I paused, unsure whether to answer with psychology or kindness. It's when someone tells you a lie over and over until you start to believe it's true, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he whispered, "That's what Mom did, huh?" And I nodded. Not because I wanted him to hate her, but because he deserved the dignity of truth. That was the balance I walked every single day, affirming their reality without filling them with bitterness. Telling them what happened, without turning it into who they are. School became a minefield. Some of the other parents had heard Natalie's side long before the footage was revealed. A few apologized. Most avoided eye contact. I was that dad for a while, the one involved in the incident. Ellie's teacher pulled me aside to say she'd been withdrawing in class. Mason's reading scores dropped. They were healing, yes, but they were also haunted. Their childhood had been fractured by adult lies, and I couldn't put the glass back in place. I could only teach them how to walk without cutting their feet. Therapy helped, slowly. Ellie began drawing again, first simple shapes, then families. At first, they were always missing a member. Sometimes it was me, sometimes her. But over time, her family drawings became fuller, brighter, more stable. She once drew a house with a tall fence and labeled it safe. Mason started journaling. I never read them unless he asked. One entry he shared read, "I'm glad the judge saw the video. I don't want to live scared." That single sentence made all the hours in court, all the anguish, feel like they hadn't been in vain. Amanda encouraged me to pursue full custody permanently. "You have the foundation," she said. "The evidence, the pattern, the therapist reports." But I hesitated. Because I knew that legally severing tie 7 partially wouldn't just hurt Natalie, it would confuse the kids. Even broken parents are still parents to their children. What happens in the court doesn't disappear from the heart. Still, Natalie's behavior left little room for compassion. She continued to send veiled messages through the system art projects for the kids that contained hidden messages. "Mommy's always watching," or "The truth is inside you." The visitation supervisor flagged them. Her privileges were suspended again, pending another review. She appealed. Again. It was denied. Again. I finally sat down with Mason and Ellie one Saturday afternoon and told them what might come next. "You might not see Mom for a while," I said. "Not because I'm trying to keep you apart, but because the court thinks it's safer this way." Mason just nodded. Ellie whispered, "Can I still keep the drawings she made me?" I said yes. Because healing isn't about erasure. It's about boundaries. The hardest part? Watching them struggle with the need to love someone who had hurt them. Ellie would ask, "Was she always like that?" Mason once said, "Maybe if I'd been better, she wouldn't have lied." Those questions broke me in a way no courtroom ever could. I answered the only way I knew how. None of this was your fault. Not 1 second of it. Meanwhile, Natalie's grip on the narrative continued slipping. Her family stopped defending her. Her sister reached out, apologized, and admitted she'd felt manipulated for years. "We believed her because we had to," she said. "But now, I'm not even sure who she is anymore." That hit me harder than I expected, because once I had loved her. Once I had made vows. Once I had believed in her the same way others now doubted. Amanda filed the motion for permanent full custody. It wasn't dramatic this time. No last-minute footage. No outbursts. Just documentation, timelines, evaluations. The judge read it all and signed the order without even glancing toward Natalie's side of the aisle. And just like that, the war ended not with a bang, but with paperwork. Natalie retained monitored visitation rights 1 hour per month, reviewed quarterly. The kids had the choice to attend or not. At first, they did. Then they stopped. I never forced them. And she didn't fight it. Not anymore. But even with the legal war over, the real challenge remained, guiding 2 wounded hearts toward a future that didn't feel like broken glass. Some nights, Ellie still cried. Some days, Mason shut down. But other times, they danced in the kitchen while I made dinner. They laughed at movies. They asked questions about life that had nothing to do with trauma. And in those moments, I knew we were finally building something stronger than what had been shattered. Peace didn't come with the court order. It didn't arrive the day the judge signed the final paperwork, granting me permanent full custody, or when Natalie's last appeal failed and was quietly buried by the system that once enabled her. No, peace came slowly, subtly like dawn after too many nights. It crept in through cracked doors, filtered through laughter that didn't have to be guarded, grew in small silences that no longer needed to be filled with fear. The day peace finally meant something. I was sitting on the porch with Mason and Ellie, watching clouds drift lazily over our backyard. And they were just kids again. No lawyers, no supervisors. Just the three of us, and a breeze that didn't carry tension for once. But getting there had been a crawl through glass. After the dust settled in court, the biggest challenge wasn't legal anymore, it was emotional. I had to learn how to father without flinching. For months, I braced myself for the other shoe to drop. I still checked the mailbox, expecting subpoenas. I jumped every time my phone buzzed. Trauma hardwires you like that. But every week without incident rewired me a little. And the kids noticed. Ellie began humming again while brushing her teeth. Mason started asking if we could go camping, something we hadn't done since before the war began. The home we once shared with Natalie had become a symbol of chaos. So I sold it. Took a loss on the mortgage, but it was worth every penny to leave those walls behind. We moved into a modest craftsman on a quiet street, near a park. Fresh start. No ghosts. I let Mason and Ellie each design their own rooms. Ellie filled hers with stars and constellations, glow-in-the-dark stickers on every inch of the ceiling. Mason went with superheroes and built a Lego city that took up most of the floor. It wasn't just decorating, it was reclaiming space, laying down emotional roots that couldn't be poisoned. In therapy, progress started to show in unexpected ways. Ellie stopped drawing monsters in her family portraits. Mason began raising his hand in class again. Their therapist said they were moving from trauma response to resilience development. I didn't fully understand the terminology, but I understood the look in my kids' eyes. Steadier, clearer, lighter. The weight was lifting, piece by piece. Natalie's role in their lives diminished, naturally. The court allowed them to choose whether to attend her monthly monitored visits, and after 3 months, they simply stopped going. No drama, no statements, just disinterest. She called twice in 1 week, trying to guilt them. I answered both times calmly. "They'll come when they're ready," I told her. She screamed that I was poisoning them. I didn't respond. There was no venom left in me to waste on old battles. She stopped calling. I took the kids to visit my parents for the first time in over a year. Watching Ellie and Mason run across the same backyard I used to play in, I felt something loosen in my chest. My dad hugged me hard and said, "You did good, son." I nearly broke, because for so long, I hadn't felt like a father at all, just a man scrambling to hold onto 2 hands as a storm tried to pull them away. And there were still hard days. Of course there were. Ellie once had a breakdown in the middle of the grocery store because she saw a woman who looked like Natalie. Mason once snapped at a teacher for bringing up both parents during a school assignment, but those moments became fewer. And when they came, we faced them together, not in silence, but with words, hugs, and the kind of honesty that doesn't sugarcoat reality, but makes it bearable. I remember the first time Ellie told me, completely unprompted, "I feel safe with you." She said it while we were putting away laundry, like it was the most casual fact in the world. But for me, it was everything. It was the gavel that mattered, the only verdict that ever really counted. Mason joined a soccer league. I coached. We lost more games than we won, but we had fun. He started calling me coach at home, just to mess with me. Ellie got into science fairs and started building volcanoes out of cardboard and baking soda. We hosted her first sleepover for giggling girls who covered her entire room in glitter and glue. And for the first time, our house felt like a home again. Not a hideout, not a battlefield, just a place where love lived out loud. I kept the court documents in a folder in my closet, just in case. I kept backups of the footage, the reports, every email. Not because I expected another war, but because I'd earned that vigilance. Trauma doesn't leave all at once. It fades like an echo. But I wasn't afraid of the noise anymore. I had survived it. so had my children. The therapist said something that stuck with me. You didn't just protect your kids. You taught them what it looks like to stand up for the truth without losing your soul. I didn't feel like a hero. I had cried too much, doubted too often, made too many mistakes. But maybe that was the point. Heroism isn't in being flawless, it's in being relentless when it counts. Natalie eventually moved. I don't know where. I don't ask. The court sealed her file after her last hearing, an official notation of manipulative litigation behavior. Whatever story she tells herself now, it no longer touches us. My story, our story, became something else, something grounded, something built, not from courtroom victories, but from the slow healing of a family that refused to break. And now, when I wake up in the morning to the sound of laughter echoing down the hall, I don't brace for impact. I rise, make pancakes, and smile. Because peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's what you build after the fire's gone out and the walls are finally yours again. And in the quiet that followed the war, we found something louder than any lie Natalie ever told. We found us, whole, unbroken, alive.